Hello, and welcome to the WKU Counseling Practicum and Internship Orientation. This applies for both the clinical mental health counseling and the marriage, couple, and family counseling programs in the Department of Counseling and Student Affairs at Western Kentucky University. We'll be covering the Practicum and Internship website, manual, paperwork, and deadlines, the clinical hours required for your experiences, where you can find an approved site or you can establish a new site, an overview of some of the practicum and internship events that will help prepare you for practicum internship, but also for a job when you're on the other end. And you'll be reminded that the practicum application is due before you begin applying to sites. This is to ensure that you are qualified to begin your practicum, and that's usually due around March 1st. But you can also submit that early if you'd like to start applying early. And then the practicum contract will be due before you begin your practicum hours. And that is usually due the last week of spring classes so that you can be registered for your summer practicum and begin on time. All right, let's begin by visiting the Practicum and Internship website. You can actually find this by going to Programs and then hit Counseling, and on the left-hand side you will see the Practicum and Internship page as well as the Internship and Job Fair page. For the Practicum and Internship page, you'll see an overview of the general resources available, like your Practicum and Internship manual, and this you will be required to read, and you're signing that you've read that when you submit your practicum application. You'll also see an approved list of Practicum and Internship websites, the Internship and Job Fair, additional counseling job opportunities that you might explore, and your professional liability insurance. There's a few other resources for specialized cases as well. Below that, you'll see a summary of the clinical paperwork, and you'll be submitting that to wku.cns.clinical.coordinator@gmail.com because WKU email limits the file sizes, and many of the practicum portfolios that get submitted are beyond that and just don't make it to us. So you'll see here that there's a tab for your practicum, your internship, establishing clinical internship sites, and additional, and I'll go over those briefly. This is required for your practicum. You'll see that there is a portfolio checklist, and this really includes a combination of all these documents and just a reminder of what you need to submit and the order in which you will submit that in your final portfolio. The practicum application is due again before you apply to practicum. Then you've got the practicum site and supervision contract. That will be due before you begin your practicum. So by the end of the spring semester, that will include the site agreement, which means that you're going to sign, your site supervisor will sign, your group supervisor, and the clinical coordinator will sign that before you get started. The site information form, which comes from your approved site, will also be a part of that formal contract, and that describes all the details of the site and the responsibilities that will be met. You'll have a practicum hour log that you will maintain weekly and get your site supervisor to sign that, and then you'll submit the summary log with that at the end of the semester. And I'll go over some of this paperwork in more detail. You'll also have a midterm and final evaluation, so it's your responsibility to be aware of those deadlines and get those to your site supervisor to complete and submit before you finish. During the practicum, you'll also be completing a practicum counseling skills scale on yourself at the midterm and final point of the semester. And this gives you a chance to see where you're at and some goals for you to continue working on. I encourage you to talk with your site supervisors about this and see what they think and how they might be able to help you in reaching your goals. By the end of the semester, you will fill out an evaluation of your supervisor and your site, and you will complete those in the full practicum portfolio. You'll also research and complete licensure application form. So if you're applying to Kentucky, which most students are, there's a sample application completed for you, but you will fill that out. If you're looking at doing marriage and family therapy instead, you may use that application. If you're interested in applying for the licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, you can fill that out. If you're going to Tennessee, they actually don't necessarily have a provisional license, but you can see here the applications that will be filled out for the full license. In Indiana, you can fill these out as well. And these are just some sample applications that, or links to applications in a couple surrounding states, but if you plan to go to another state, it's helpful for you to look ahead. For example, Indiana and Florida are two states that require you to have 1,000 hours of practicum and internship rather than the 700 that we have here in Kentucky, which is the CACREP requirement as a minimum. So you will, if you're going to those states, you can either take an extra practicum or internship as part of your elective courses, or you might want to try to buffer and build those into your total hours over the 3 semesters so that you can get to that 1,000 hours to qualify for those. You'll see that the internship paperwork looks very similar with the exception of that practicum, counseling skills, self-evaluation, and we'll go over the others in just a minute. Now, before you begin, you're also going to be expected to look at the related departmental policies on security of media, and that means how you contain and lock up the media that you're going to be showing, as well as the destruction of it once you've reviewed that. Now, you should also be aware that there is a practicum preparation sequence, and this is the 5 courses that are required is 554, 55, 58, 59, and 560. And so those are all required for you to have a B or greater, which is why you submit a copy of your unofficial transcripts with your practicum application. You'll see the internship grading. You must have a B or better in practicum to continue on to internship 1. Then you must have a B in that internship to complete internship 2. At the bottom of this page are the directions for working with these forms. Now, most of the forms up above that I covered are Word documents, and they're easily downloadable. You can complete them, and then you can save them as a PDF and then forward them for signature. There's a number of tutorials down here at the bottom, so creating your electronic portfolio, all of the documents that you submit, like the practicum application has a number of documents that go along with that. So it's going to be important that you combine all those documents into a single PDF file, and you can see how to do that right here. And you can also see how to create your signature and add it into PDF. So you can write it on a piece of paper, scan it in. We'll talk to you about how you get the background out and then how you can insert it using Adobe Reader. It's very simple, and you can do that with the free programs that are available through Qt PDF and Adobe Reader. So you don't have to have any additional work. And there's a couple of the free software downloads. I also encourage you to check out Toggle. And this is a great timekeeper that you can basically start and stop like a stopwatch. And then you can track things by different categories. So if you set up your Toggle to track by date and hours, that toggle could go onto your desktop or on your laptop, or it can also be on your phone, so you can start and stop the timer. You can go back and you can edit the times so that you can easily fill that into your spreadsheet for your hour log, but you're able to keep track of it as you're going through. I also encourage you to pay attention to the dates and deadlines on the right hand side. So the dates up on the top are for the current practicum or internships group. The dates below will be for the next set of practicum and internship. So if you're watching practicum orientation now, you're getting ready to begin your practicum in the summer, so you will pay attention to these dates at the bottom. So you'll see that you should be attending the practicum orientation and the events that come with that. You'll have to get your practicum application form in, then you'll be submitting your practicum contract. You'll begin your practicum, have a midterm evaluation, then you'll have your final evaluation and all your final portfolios due. So you'll see that those dates really fall in line and they'll change each year, but that's pretty much the quick outline of the deadlines that you'll have for the practicum and internship paperwork. So let's go back and take a little bit deeper look at some of these documents. So I will open up the Practicum portfolio checklist. And again, I said all of these were Word documents. So this is just an outline of the paperwork that you will be submitting. You'll go ahead and fill in your name and your information at the top for all of these documents. And then you'll easily just check the boxes as you complete these. And this document, as well as all of these others, will be in your Practicum portfolio, and you can submit these in this order. Again, those tutorials at the bottom of that webpage will show you how to move your documents around so that you can easily create a single PDF with all of these documents included, and move the pages around so that you have everything in that order. Now this is the Practicum application form. Again, you'll submit all of your student information at the top, and typically our practicum and internships are summer, fall, and spring, so you'll just add the years. You can create the proposed clinical sites, but again, you're not stuck with that. It just gives us an indication of what you're looking for. And of course, your preferred locations. If you are in Bowling Green, you can just list Bowling Green, but if you're in other places, you can list a priority of that. So this Practicum application package will include all of these documents. As I mentioned, the unofficial transcripts, and what I'm really looking at are those 5 classes, and do you have a B or better? Are you currently in them during the spring semester? But if you do not complete them with a B for that semester, you will not be able to enter Practicum. So the proof of Practicum professional membership and the copy of your malpractice insurance. There are several of these organizations that if you join as a member, then you will get free insurance, and you can go into your student profile and print a copy of that for this record. Now, you'll also have to complete this Practicum orientation as well. And then a test that you have completed and read through these materials, and that you have completed the requirements, and that you will, upon Practicum, start to agree to the following. And that really means adhere to the departmental policies, to the ACA Code of Ethics, to other administrative and CACREP policies, and complete the course with a B or better. You and the clinical coordinator will sign that once everything is approved, so that you may begin to start applying for your sites. To figure out where you will apply for your sites, you can see at the top that there is an approved Practicum and internship sites. And here you'll see a list of local sites if you're going to stay in Bowling Green, and you'll also see a number of remote sites down at the bottom. There may be some alternate sites which maybe they've reached out, or they've kind of expired and we don't have a site information form on them. But there are a number of sites that have provided opportunities. Some may have a site supervisor that left, others may be on track. So if you are interested, you can take a look and open the site information form. You'll see that it says information about the agency, a description of the opportunities available. If you are enrolled in the Marriage, Couple, and Family Counseling Program, then you'll definitely want to make sure that it has a description of how they're meeting those hours as well. You'll see the population characteristics, counseling modalities, and any professional development opportunities that are going to be available, the days and time. So in this case, there's a 2-semester commitment. They'd like you to at least commit 2 semesters to this. Some will only require 1 semester commitment, and others will expect a 3-semester commitment. So you may change sites from your practicum to your internship, or within that, if the site is okay with that. But if you make this commitment to them, sometimes this is for long-term longevity with their clients. Others that do acute care, say maybe a crisis unit where you're only seeing clients for a month or even less, like a week, then they may be fine with you doing a 1-semester commitment so that you have that opportunity to explore other sites. And then some sites may take a number of students, so you can take a look at that as well. You may have directions to the site. This page goes over the hours that you must complete. So all of the sites are required to complete the number of hours, but this site and the site supervisor has attested that they can fulfill those for you. So if you're completing your practicum, you need at least 100 total clock hours, and at least 40 hours must be in direct service with clients. And that means you have to either do individual counseling, psychoeducational assessments, intakes, something in direct contact with that particular client. You'll also have supervision hours required, and you'll also have the rest will be indirect hours where you can do paperwork, recording, insurance, reimbursements, and all of that. But you at a minimum have to have 100 total clock hours with at least 40 direct for your practicum. And a site will not get approved if they cannot offer at least your practicum and or your internship hours. Here, some sites, there's like Life Skills Summer Program, will only be able to offer a practicum because they're only in the summer, or I guess they could do an internship in the summer if that's what you were doing. But typically our practicums fall in the summer. If you're marriage and family therapy, then you'll definitely want to make sure that they can meet your marriage, couple, and family hours. And that must mean a minimum of 12 direct hours. And if they cannot, it will indicate that here. So this is probably not the best place for a marriage and family site. However, this site does give many marriage and family hours because Balance Therapeutic does work with children. So the requirement for your internship is you all must complete 300 total clock hours each semester, and 120 clock hours must be in direct service with clients. So you'll have 300 hours in the fall and 300 hours in the spring. So over the entire year, you'll have a total of 280 direct hours with a total of 700 total hours. So 280 direct hours, which is included in the 700 total hours. Now, again, here, if you are doing marriage and family, then you will need a minimum of 36 direct hours over the course of the 120 hours. And that is to meet the state licensure requirements. If you're short on that, that does not mean that you have to switch your major to clinical mental health counseling. It just simply means that you'll not meet the requirements for the licensed marriage and family therapy. But if you don't intend to get that and you intend to stay focused on the licensed professional counselor credential, then you should be okay because it's not specifically a CACREP accreditation requirement. So it is going to be important that the sites allow for video recording. If they do not, we have worked with sites to make sure that they do that because that is the preferred method for you to show a videotape in your session. And we really prefer you to show yourself and the client so we can really see the interaction between you all. However, if there is a concern about showing the client on tape, then you can just show the video of yourself. If in some emergency cases you may do audio only, but that's really not recommended because it's not as helpful. So if they say no to this, then the chances are we will not approve the site because you must show at least 2 videos each semester. But I usually will talk with a supervisor at that point, and we will work an arrangement to where you will be able to at least get a client that would agree to the videotapes, or that you can, if you're in a jail, that may not be allowed with a prison population, but they may send you to another one of their sites to work part-time outside of that environment to where you could still work with clients and videotape your skills. And then of course the supervisor is agreeing that they're going to meet the clinical supervision requirement for the site supervision, which allows you to meet with an individual or triadic, and this means that one supervisor should meet with one intern, or they can meet with 2 interns, which is the triadic. So that is documented under your individual supervision. So the licensure board for Kentucky or other states as well will also allow the same dynamic. So a supervisor can either it can call individual supervision if it's 1 or 2 interns under supervision. Now, when it's 3 or more, that's a group, and so that falls under group supervision. But as the site supervisor also agrees to provide that supervision for you each week and remain on site whenever you're seeing clients. If they're not on site, they must make sure that another licensed therapist is on site and that you're both aware that that supervisor is away. And then they must accompany you on direct service hours outside the agency or ensure that you're going to go with another therapist, and that you provide or they will provide regular feedback to students, complete the midterm and final evaluations, sign all the paperwork, and consult with the faculty supervisors and the clinical coordinator as needed. Now, the site supervisor is listed there with their credentials and a description. An alternative site supervisor may be listed, but they may not be, but this is in the event that the primary site supervisor is unavailable. The application process is here at the end, and so you will be able to see to whom you should reach out to. And in this case, you might just send a resume and interest to somebody's email, or you actually have to fill out an application on a website like Life Skills. You'll see estimated due dates, expectations of students on site. Most will not require specific additional courses because these courses are already required. And then a few sites may offer financial compensation if you have an undergraduate degree in a counseling related field and you work at an agency that can bill for you. But most of our internship sites do not offer funding. And then they will return that form. And occasionally a site supervisor has decided they don't want to take additional interns, or a new site supervisor has moved in as somebody has transitioned out. So if that's the case, we just simply need to make sure that we get that site information form updated with the new information and a copy of the site supervisor's resume on file. So if you plan to establish a new site, let's go back to the Practicum and Internship webpage. You'll see this establishing clinical sites. So you want to review the Practicum Internship Manual for the instructions for establishing a site, but those are kind of summarized here. The first of all is asking the site supervisor to review the Practicum and Internship Manual for the instructions, and that's typically pages 13 to 16, which focus on the site supervisor and the site requirements to make sure that they can meet those. They will complete the site information form. So this is linked to a blank form, so I will ask them to go ahead and fill that out. So you can actually help them fill that out as well, but it's going to be important that they download the form to their computer and fill that version out. Unfortunately, if you open it up in this browser window, try to type it in, it will not save. But as you see that we provide a copy of those approved site information forms for everyone, we really want you to fill out the form without printing it and scanning it and sending it back in, because if the form is already online, we can simply download and forward it for approval later. It's also going to be much easier to review and update. Once that's completed, the site information form and the site supervisor's resume should be sent to the clinical coordinator at that address, and the site supervisor training video has been posted, and it's a reminder for them to kind of go over some of the paperwork requirements, and then provide a basic supervision model, which typically aligns with the intern process. So you're welcome to watch that as well if you'd like to see kind of the expectations of supervision. Then we'll schedule a site visit between the clinical coordinator and the sites, and this typically takes about 30 to 45 minutes. And then once approved, the interns, you should provide them with the Practicum or Internship site and supervision contract for them to sign, which confirms that you both have reviewed the manual, are familiar with the roles and responsibilities, and that they agree to work with you during the specified term. So It's not that scary to start a new site, and this is how we've been able to create a number of additional approved sites. So feel free to reach out to the sites that have already been approved, but if you're trying to find a site, or especially if you already have a job at a site that could qualify, or you're commuting and you want to find a site closer to your place of residence, then that's certainly an option for you. So those are going to be the first steps to making sure that you've got this practicum and site supervision contract. You have found a place that you can complete your hours for either one semester or all three, and then you have that agreement. So once you get that in, you'll start your practicum or your internship semester, and you will begin filling out this hour log. Okay, this opens up into an Excel spreadsheet, and this will allow you to keep track of your hours throughout the entire semester. It will also print in a single page for each sheet. The print features have been set up, but for some reason, if you see that your print is not working and the signature pages go off, I encourage you to make sure that it's set at print to fit, so it won't fall into a single page to include all of the information that's on that page. So this first page is your home page, and you'll just see that this summarizes your total hours to include your direct, indirect, and supervision hours, as well as your total. It allows you to kind of keep up with your hours, see where you're at and where you need to be. You will also be attesting that your hours are reported accurately at the end of the semester, and it provides a list of instructions here at the bottom for filling out the form and getting it started. And in week 1, you'll see that the dates start, and if I set those dates, the names here will actually populate from the front page, and I'll show you how to do that. But here is where you'll begin tracking your logs. And then each week, I encourage you to sign and have your site supervisor sign that as well. And you can enter that electronically, or you can go ahead and add your own signature electronically, print it to PDF, and then forward it to your site supervisor to sign through Adobe Reader. But if you get started, let's say student name is Alpha, you're in the clinical mental health track, your site is ABC Counseling Associates, your site supervisor is Beta, and your faculty supervisor is Gamma, just to make things simple. You'll see here that they automatically populated these extra weeks throughout the semester. Now, when you start to change the date, there's a formula in this first column. So if I set today's date as that, you'll see 2021, it's updated and it forwards 1 week from that. So the formula is set up here to where it's going to add every 7 days. So you just set that first date and it will automatically populate that top part for you. Now the rest will not automatically populate. These are set up the same throughout all of the spreadsheets. However, if you wish to change this other category and add an extra feature for yourself, then you can go ahead and do that. For example, if you are doing the addiction certificate, you can add that in and do special addictions related hours, but that will not change. And the reason for this is because you may want to track something different. However, if you really are just going to be tracking addictions the entire time, but you don't plan to do any test administration, you can also change this if you prefer to focus on something specific as well, like say play therapy hours. And then you can move those throughout and you can just update those. But the purpose of this is because next week you may not necessarily have addictions hours, or you may not have play, but you may be doing some different types of activities. Now the same applies for these direct hours. Again, if you're These are going to be possibly some of your most standard ones, but if there's something else that you do on a regular basis, feel free to change the other activities, and then you can do that throughout. But again, they won't change throughout all of these because your activities may change from week to week. You may have attended a professional conference in week 1, but in week 2, it wouldn't apply because you're doing some other special events. And then your total direct hours seem a little bit crazy that they're all spread out, but there's a purpose for this. The Kentucky licensure application requires you to separate all these hours and report them in these categories. So you will complete site individual supervision. This is a requirement for your site supervisor. So say on Monday afternoons, you complete your hour each week, and you can go ahead and fill that in, and you should have at least 1 hour a week here. Now, site group supervision is not traditionally required or typical. However, there may be cases where you're in an organization where you have multiple interns or even provisional staff, and you're kind of doing case staffings where you're working in a group together to do the case management for other clients. And so you might add that hour there, but that often is going to be 0, so I'm going to leave that 0 to help avoid confusion. University individual supervision is not required and expected normally either. However, if you're working and you need secondary help and you need additional support, then you can seek out individual supervision from your faculty supervisor and get that additional support. So you have a particularly tough case, or you need a second opinion and you just reach out for that additional support to say watch a video or get some feedback and consultation, you can go ahead and track it there. Your university group supervision is required, and that will be the hour-and-a-half class that you have throughout the week. And so you'll include that. So these are typically going to be your requirements for each week at a minimum. You may have these additional 2, but you have to have these minimum. So you should have, over the course of 15 weeks, at least about 15 hours there, and then about 22 plus hours of group supervision throughout the 15 weeks. So you should be attending these at a minimum. So your hours may just look like 0 on the licensure application, and that's perfectly acceptable as long as you have at least 1 hour of individual supervision and 1 hour of groups, or 1.5 hours of group supervision each week, which is a CACREP accreditation requirement. So as you see here, if we just kind of go through and add some hours in and complete these requirements, and now you've got that. So you'll see your totals to date add up, and then they have total weeks and total dates. Now week 2, you start to add in some hours here, and you complete your hours here. Just go ahead and add it on the same days because you've got your supervision, and maybe you do 4 hours here. So now your total week includes week 1 or week 2 only, but your totals to date equals weeks 1 and 2. And this will happen throughout all of these spreadsheets. So be mindful that all these spreadsheets include calculations and formulas, especially all these gray box areas. But also now you can start to see that these are filling out based on the numbers that were put in the direct, indirect supervision and total week hours, and then your cumulative hours. So this includes week 1 and your week 2. It will also summarize the number of hours so that as you track your 40 direct hours and your 100 direct hours over practicum, or your 120 direct hours and your 300 total hours over your internship, you will be able to track those at the bottom. If for some reason you're going to be taking a time off because you say have a surgery, or there's a snow week, or there's something that your site is closed down, or you are not able to work and it's a 0, I encourage you to go ahead and indicate that here, out for surgery. So if this happened to be March 1st through the 7th, then you can just indicate that, and that would allow anybody else to see that you were gone, and that is why there's 0, but it makes sense as far as the weeks moving forward, so you're not having to address things and the dates match up with the traditional hours. And so that, of course, would reflect on week 3 as well. So if you have any questions on this log, you can ask again when the practicum starts, but this provides you with an overview. So each week, as a reminder, you're going to sign and date, and then you'll get your site supervisor to sign. I encourage you to keep up with this. There have been cases where the site supervisors have left the organization. Sometimes a site supervisor will plan to leave, but when they've taken on a commitment for interns, they will maybe remain just until the end of the semester, but then they'll move on. However, that's not always the case. There have been individuals who've unfortunately just quit or were injured. So if you submit these on a regular basis, especially during your regular individual supervision hours, then you can go ahead and just get those signed and keep those up to date. It's always good practice for you to do this during your licensure as well, because it's going to be important in the event that something happens to that individual and you can't document those hours, or you can't document that with supervision, and that's going to be critical. So the next thing is this midterm and final evaluation. So it's going to be the same form, and I recommend that you send a copy of this to your site supervisor several weeks before the deadline, and then go ahead and you fill out this top information. Again, you'll want to check whether it's the midterm or the final evaluation, and check whether this is during your practicum or your internship. And then they will complete the boxes. If you send this to them via Word, it's easy for them to just simply check the boxes. And I always encourage supervisors to go ahead and grade on a 3. A 3 means it's satisfactory. You are meeting the expectations for your training level. But what that allows you to do is to show where you're actually above expectations for your training level. But then it also shows that if you're below expectations, and that may mean that you just haven't had the experience. So it's really just, grading down the average as you are meeting the expectations, and you should only typically see, 4s and 5s where you're really outstanding and you're doing well. And in practicum, that's not standard. So I encourage you to just be open to the process and the feedback that you're willing to receive. And they should be evaluating you on the foundations, prevention, intervention, assessment and diagnosis, diversity, and advocacy. Now, these should be totaled at the bottom. And if they are not totaled by your site supervisors, then please total them yourselves before you submit them with your practicum portfolio. It's important because we need to collect these documentation, these total average scores for our CACREP accreditation. And by doing that before you submit them, it's a lot easier for us. So you may have had, so there's 25 rows, but if you had, 5 in each, here's what we might do. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And this last column is not applicable. But if you had all 25, and then you were totaling the score for each column, which is the number of checks times the rating score. So 5 times 1 is a 5, 5 times 2 is a 10, 5 times 3 is a 15, times 4 is a 20, and times 5 is a 25. And now you total all of these scores up, so you've got 75 as a total score here. And then you divide the total score by 25 if there are no items that are not in the non-applicable category. Okay, so this would be 75 divided by 25, and that equals a score of 3, which makes sense, right? If these are evenly spread across all of the scores, then it totally makes sense that a 3 is your middle score. But for some reason, if we had 0 here, and we had 5 scores that were NA. This carries no weight. So that would mean that we had a score of 70 here, and we would have only 20 to go from, right? So these add up, but you don't count that, so your denominator is only 20, but your total category is 70. And so your total average score would be 70 divided by 20, which is an average score of 3.5. And then your site supervisor can type up comments that address your progress. And we encourage them to type up your strengths as well as the areas for growth and potential goals that you can work on. And then they will sign it. And don't forget that you need to sign it as well before you submit it to your faculty supervisor. And then you will scan and submit a copy to the clinical coordinator at the midterm. And for your final version, it will be included in your final portfolio along with all the other documents. So your counseling skills scale is only required during practicum, and this goes over the types of skills that you've learned in techniques: attending, basic listening, deepening the session. How are you utilizing those? And again, judging yourself based on these kind of scores here. And talking about your strengths, identify your areas for growth, and identify your plan for improving your areas that you need growth. So you'll sign it and your university supervisor will sign it, but you're also encouraged to talk to your site supervisor about that. And once you complete the end of the semester, you'll go ahead and fill out a similar evaluation of your supervisor and your site and give any feedback for them. Now I'm going to pay attention to just this licensure application. This is one of the other components of your practicum application. Again, you can fill this out for whatever state you plan to go to, but there's this blank application. Now the Kentucky application is online now, but this was the original application, and it still is very much aligned with the online application. So by filling this out in Word, then you will have a great outline for easily cutting and pasting the information right into the online application and having it all consolidated without problems, because you're going to need to have that completed so you can go through it all in one sitting. There is a sample Kentucky LPCA application, and you can see that here. The blue text indicates the instructions that I wrote in as just reminders, like answer the questions honestly. These are just provided as samples. And then of course the red information is your information, and I've just filled that out just to give you an indication of what that looks like. If you're following the process, you'll want to include your education, you'll want to include your classes. Now you'll only include the classes that are listed on your transcripts, but here's a list of the traditional Western Kentucky University courses that might fall under each of these categories, and you'll want to make sure that you have at least one class in each category, or you will not meet the requirements for the state licensure boards. And you'll go through that, make sure you'll complete all those courses, and then of course your practicum and internship, you have a requirement of at least 600 hours, and our program requires you to do 700 hours. That is a K-GRUP accreditation requirement, so you'll go ahead and fill that out as well. Then there's the section 4, and you'll want to make sure that you complete that one for each semester. And I do encourage you to go ahead and get this signed, because it can serve as documentation and support that you've done that if you need to submit that separately. But typically your supervisors are going to have to complete and fill this out and verify it online, but if you have this completed, it will be easy to go ahead and fill this in on the web page. So obviously the red is the information that you would complete about yourself, you have your university college. This is the supervisor that taught your internship class on campus, the group supervision class. This agency internship completed is where you completed your internship and your site supervisor information and the description. Well, guess what? Most of this information comes from your site information form, so you want to make sure and include that. And definitely include the information in this description that really describes counseling responsibilities. The board definitely looks for that. And then here you'll see the direct hours and your indirect hours, and then you'll see the supervision hours are separated. So the individual supervision and the group supervision hours typically will look like this: 10 and 0, and then 0 and 18 to 22 hours here. Now this total was indicated that it should equal all, but the online portion will automatically calculate those totals for you. And then if you sign and have your university instructor sign that, these hours should match your hour logs. And when the clinical coordinator needs to verify that, or even the sites or the faculty supervisors, they can go into your student files and verify those hours before they approve those online. Okay, so the final area that we need to cover is the internship and job fair and the other practicum and internship events. So the practicum orientation, this video is the first part of that, and you'll watch that before you begin. Then you'll have an opportunity for Q&A, an internship panel. So I encourage you to really come and hear from current interns about their experiences, suggestions, words of advice as you plan your own clinical experience, and think about some questions that you might have for them, like about their typical day, so that you can gain from their experiences and their wisdom. You'll also have an opportunity to hear from the site supervisors, and this panel will give you an opportunity to ask questions and find out about practicum and internship job opportunities. Think about advice that you might want to ask them, like preparing their clinical experiences. What are they looking for? What is a good intern? What's a bad intern? Go ahead and ask any of those questions that you have. And then the internship and job fair is typically a tabled event, but unfortunately sometimes it may have to be online due to situations or convenience for some individuals. So making sure that you're reaching out, and in this year we're doing a pre-scheduled 10-minute private session via online, but in previous years we've also done tabled events where you'll see pictures of the site supervisor panel, but also kind of this tabled event where you have an opportunity to get to meet a variety of supervisors and other students, and you'll have an opportunity to sometimes give your resume or at least hear about opportunities, and they'll get a chance to meet you and put a name to a face and identify who they might want. So look back on this webpage for the sites that are coming and the participants who will be attending. But that ends our overview of the practicum and internship, really to cover the general gist of how you get started, the paperwork that's required, and the steps that you'll need to take to get enrolled and progress through successfully. So if you have any questions or to send your paperwork to the clinical coordinator, you can send it to wku.cns.clinical.coordinator@gmail.com. That email box is monitored by the clinical coordinator as well as their assistant, their graduate assistant, who is helping work with the paperwork. So you can always check out the website at wku.edu/CSA for Counseling Student Affairs and find this information under the counseling programs. Thank you for your attention. We look forward to getting you started in your clinical experiences. Have a great day.